Most people live their entire lives inside the greatest financial experiment in human history and never realize it. They work, save, invest, and borrow, believing the system is stable because it has always seemed to be. But behind the screens and ledgers of modern finance lies a simple truth. The world is drowning in debt, and no civilization has ever survived at this depth for long. Today, global debt has surpassed $300 trillion, 4 times the size of the world economy. Governments borrow trillions as if numbers were infinite. Corporations pile on leverage to inflate their profits. Families sign 30-year contracts for houses they don't yet own. And central banks, the silent architects of this illusion, keep the machine alive by pressing a single key: create credit. Debt has become so normal that people forget it's not money. It's a promise. And promises, once broken, can destroy empires. Debt is older than money itself. Long before coins or paper, ancient civilizations tracked obligations in clay and stone. In Mesopotamia, thousands of years before Christ, priests kept records of who owed whom: grain, cattle, silver. Debt wasn't just economic. It was moral, even spiritual. To break a promise was to offend the gods. But the ancients also knew something modern societies have forgotten. Too much debt leads to collapse. That's why kings sometimes declared debt jubilees, wiping the slate clean to preserve order. It wasn't mercy, it was survival. If every farmer became a slave to interest, there would be no one left to feed the empire. Debt was power. But power built on debt was always unstable. Fast forward to Renaissance Europe. Goldsmiths and early bankers discovered a dangerous secret: they could lend out more money than they physically held. Few people ever withdrew their gold at once, so paper receipts began circulating as currency. Fractional banking was born. The illusion worked until it didn't. When too many demanded gold at once, the system collapsed. Even kings fell for the same illusion. Spain, after flooding Europe with New World silver, borrowed recklessly to fund endless wars. 4 times in the 16th century, the Spanish crown declared bankruptcy. Empires filled with treasure learned the same lesson as poor farmers in Babylon. Debt makes slaves of those who believe it can last forever. By the 18th century, debt had become global. The British Empire financed wars and colonies through government bonds. Investors grew rich, lending to the state, and the working classes paid the interest through taxes. Debt, once personal, had become political. It was the invisible chain linking citizens to empires. The 20th century transformed debt from a risk into a religion. World War I left nations drowning in obligations they could never repay. Germany's reparations under the Treaty of Versailles destroyed its currency, leading to wheelbarrows of paper marks for a loaf of bread and the rise of chaos that followed. Debt didn't just destroy wealth, it destroyed stability. After World War II, the victors tried to rebuild order through a new architecture: the Bretton Woods system. The US dollar became the global anchor, convertible to gold. The promise was discipline, but discipline is fragile when greed is an option. By the 1962, the United States printed far more dollars than it could redeem. Foreign governments began demanding gold, and in 1971, Nixon closed the window. Gold was gone. Debt was unleashed. From that moment, money became pure faith, backed by nothing but confidence and the hope that others would keep believing. And for a while, they did. Once the link to gold disappeared, central banks found they could shape the economy with the turn of a dial. Lower interest rates meant more borrowing, more spending, more growth. When crises hit, the cure was always the same: inject liquidity, print, lend, repeat. Each crisis demanded a larger dose of the same medicine, until the system itself became addicted. The 1980 seconds brought a new era of leverage. Reagan and Thatcher championed deregulation and credit expansion as paths to prosperity. Debt became patriotic, even virtuous. Banks lent freely, households followed suit. The developing world borrowed from the West, and when the bills came due, the Latin American debt crisis shattered the illusion. But the addiction continued. Dot-com bubbles, housing bubbles, sovereign bubbles, each one inflated by the same oxygen: easy money. Then came 2008, the year the world nearly discovered what happens when promises break. Banks had built pyramids of leverage so tall that a few bad mortgages nearly collapsed the system. When it all fell apart, governments didn't let the debt die, they made it immortal. They bailed out the reckless, rescued the powerful, and handed the bill to the future. The illusion survived. The system was saved. But something fundamental changed. Debt stopped being a tool of prosperity. It became the foundation of survival. In the decades since, global debt has tripled. $300 trillion, a number so vast, it no longer means anything to the human mind. Governments borrow to pay interest on what they already owe. Corporations borrow to buy back their own stock. Consumers borrow to maintain lifestyles their wages no longer support. The world is running on credit, not productivity. And yet, few question it, because the system teaches us not to. Debt is invisible. When you use a credit card, you borrow. When your government runs a deficit, you borrow in your name without consent. When markets rise, it's often because money that doesn't exist has been lent into existence. The illusion works until trust falters. When interest rates rise, or inflation bites, the invisible chains become visible. Mortgage payments double. Governments panic. Corporations freeze. And suddenly, everyone remembers, debt is not wealth, it is tomorrow's problem, brought into today. The United States, the anchor of the world's financial system, now carries over $34 trillion in national debt. Its interest payments alone rival military spending. It borrows to pay the interest on money it already borrowed, the economic equivalent of using a credit card to pay another credit card. Japan's debt exceeds 250% of its GDP. Europe's South Italy, Greece, Spain survives on borrowed time and borrowed money. China, long seen as immune, hides mountains of local and corporate debt under layers of bureaucracy. Everywhere you look, the same pattern repeats. Leaders trading tomorrow's stability for today's calm. This is not just arithmetic. It's psychology. Politicians love debt because it delays consequences. Raising taxes angers voters. Cutting spending loses elections. Borrowing, though that feels painless, until it isn't. Debt buys time, but time always runs out. So, what happens when the numbers finally stop working? History gives only 3 endings. You pay the debt back rare. You inflate it away common. Or you default catastrophic. Inflation is the preferred escape. When prices rise, governments quietly shrink their obligations. $1 trillion of debt becomes cheaper in real terms. The cost is invisible, spread across millions of households watching their savings erode. It's the perfect crime, silent, deniable, and effective. The second path, restructuring, is what happens when denial fails. Greece in 2012, Argentina in 2001, Russia in 1998, each declared, in different ways, we can't pay. Bondholders lost, citizens suffered, confidence vanished. The system reset only to start the cycle again. And then there's outright default, the hard reset of history. Nations walk away. Currencies die. The slate is wiped clean, painfully, violently. Every empire, from Rome to Britain, has reached that point eventually. Debt is not just an economic instrument, it's a political weapon. Whoever controls credit, controls the future. Banks lend, governments borrow, citizens obey. When the system trembles, the powerful are rescued, the ordinary are sacrificed. That's the pattern again and again. Debt keeps economies running, but it also keeps societies docile. As long as you owe, you depend. As long as nations owe, they obey. It is the invisible empire, no armies, no borders, just obligations. The global debt bubble will not deflate gently. Whether through inflation, restructuring, or default, a reckoning is inevitable. But for individuals, awareness is the first defense. Understand that debt is not wealth. That easy money is never free. That every promise written in numbers can vanish overnight. True wealth is what endures when credit disappears: land, resources, skills, trust. The assets that hold value when illusions fade. Because in the end, debt is only a story. And every story ends when people stop believing it. The only real question is who wakes up first.